and you've gone a little bit like my story, but you've gone kind of promotion, and then suddenly you're out. Yeah, I don't even know where to start. I've always felt I love what I do because I get to kind of change people's lives by giving them, either a new opportunity or a career change. I felt it was like, what is the most kind of anti-typical headhunter thing I could do? And headhunters typically keep their cards close to their chest, which is their network. And I said, I'm just going to invert it and allow people in my network to kind of find each other. That just makes me so happy.
Mark, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today. I was looking forward to having you.
Such a pleasure, Gary. Delighted to be here.
Well, and it's, we've been talking about doing this for a while. There's so many people in our respective networks with a lot of overlap as well that certainly want to know more about you and the journey, because they know you as the guy that's omnipresent, that knows everybody. And just for the purpose of the audience, Mark is the guy that if I was ever in trouble, I needed something anywhere in the world, I'd be like, Mark, do you know anybody that can get me on a yacht to get out of a war zone or something? Mark would be the guy.
I'll always take a call, Gary, to get you out of trouble.
Luckily, I haven't had to use that card yet. So far it's been Mark. I'm going to go to Dubai. Any people that I should connect with has been much more casual. But Mark is currently in Switzerland, although he's everywhere all the time, and we'll hopefully see each other in Miami next month.
Amazing. Looking forward to it, Gary.
So, Mark, I'll start with something that, think of sort of people that don't know you, or the people that know you, but that also think a little bit about, I know Mark a little casual, but I never know where he grew up, sort of what his upbringing was like.
Yeah.
So take us through a little bit of your early life, a little bit about who Mark is.
Sure. So I'm Irish, Gary, born in 1974 in Dublin. I'm the eldest son. I've got a younger sister who lives in London, a younger brother who lives in Dublin. My dad passed 2 years ago with Alzheimer's, but a very peaceful passing, So my mom, I think that's who I get the energy from. A social butterfly, still with her old school friends, with her golf club community, her tennis community, her bridge community. I definitely learned how to be comfortable around people through my mom. I went to the same school for basically most of my education. My two best friends are still who I know from school, and I went to university in Dublin just around the corner. So my most interesting kind of experience, I was a rugby player for many, many years, and that was my passion. And I went to Spain on an Erasmus program. So this university kind of gap year, in university, but basically just, drinking. And I was playing rugby in the north of Spain. I was in Santiago de Compostela. It was, best year of my life until that point. And look, I kind of went back, finished university, did a postgraduate in international marketing. I studied Spanish, psychology, linguistics in UCD in Dublin. I got on this program called the EOP, European Orientation Program, which allowed kind of Irish graduates with languages to help Irish companies looking to go abroad. So the Jemiesons, the Guinnesses, the Murphys, the Kerrygolds, all those kind of Irish consumer goods companies in particular. I got offered a job. This is kind of my probably one of the interesting stories. I was the number 2 candidate for the Jemieson brand manager in Argentina. And I was I was so destroyed, Gary, when I didn't get that job. I was like, look, I speak Spanish. I enjoy whiskey. Living in Buenos Aires would have been a dream come true. But I kind of learned then that, look, like sliding doors moments. Things change. And while I was so disappointed not to get that job, a week later, I was asked by Heineken, who own Murphy's, which is an Irish brewery, a stout competitor to Guinness, to they were looking for Irish talent to go to Prague, Dubai, or Brussels. And I thought, I was like Goldilocks. Dubai was too hot, Brussels a bit cold, Prague could be interesting. And I went out to Prague in November 97 to work for Heineken and Murphy's in Central and Eastern Europe, which was their kind of growth region at the time. So look, that was kind of the start of it, you know.
Well, and Mark, I see a common theme here. Jameson, Heineken. There was an alcohol theme either way. So.
Still, I stopped drinking 2 years ago, Gary. But up until that point, that theme was still very strong. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I think we get to a point in our lives where we have to make those decisions. But that theme is.
Oh yeah, look,
That's why we have.
I loved it. Like even kind of the social aspect of it was fantastic. I just found the last 2 years it was just slowing me down. I wasn't a big drinker, definitely more beer and wine. But I just find it was slowing me down and making me a little bit less kind of productive. And I'm a morning person, so I love the mornings. The mornings for me are so critical to kind of get up and get going. And like I said, not a big drinker, but I just said, look, it's probably like I'll just eliminate it, and just became a bit easier, you know. So
Uh, well, it's not a bad thing. All the research tells us that, hey, after all, that may be the right way to go anyway. So, Mark, I'm pivoting to something, and it's, everyone knows you as a critical person in placing executives, board members, etc. How do you end up in that field? And we talked a little bit about sort of the early stages of the career, but it
yeah, so
sounds.
that look, that's basically the next part of the story, Gary. So a perfect segue. So while I was working with Heineken in Prague, and I was getting to know Century, and I thought I was good at languages like linguistics, Spanish, Portuguese, French. Like I speak language, I love languages. So I thought Czech is not going to be a problem. It's obviously like a completely different
Yeah.
language, Slavic. I mean, just like, I mean, there's so many consonants kind of pushed together. It was really, I think I had the same lesson probably 10 times in a row. And I said, look, forget about it. I'm never going to learn. And I did the trick then of getting a girlfriend who became my wife, but she spoke perfect English. So it was a little bit, thanks to her mom and grandmother, they had the patience to spend some time with me on my Czech. But I was finishing my expat contract with Heineken. I fell in love in Prague, fell in love with Prague, loved Central and Eastern Europe. And I went to a headhunter to help kind of find me another job locally. And this was February, March 1999. And Central and Eastern Europe was kind of the world's most dynamic growth region at that time.
For sure.
All the consumer goods companies, the Cokes, the Nestle's, the Heineken, all those players were either there or like ramping up there. They were certainly there kind of since kind of the early 90s. But everybody was growing like crazy. And the headhunter said, look, Mark, have you ever thought about becoming a headhunter? Look, you've got a strong consumer goods background, credibility. You seem like a nice enough kind of curious fella. Like, is that something? I said, I have absolutely no idea, but look, let's give it a go. So I started April Fool's Day, 1999, working for a UK search firm focusing on emerging markets called Antal International. Learned my kind of trade there. Fantastic team, a great manager at the time, Mary Keane, interesting kind of CEO of the business who I learned a lot from, Tony Goodwin. Got approached by a second search firm after about 3.5 years there called Pedersen and Partners. I always describe that as kind of my search MBA. Paul Pedersen and Michael Nasir, two like incredible search consultants. I really learned a lot in the year I had with them. And then I was approached by Spengler Fox, which were part of an Irish group who were looking to kind of build and grow and roll out this business. But that was an opportunity to go to Paris. And we'd had a couple of illnesses in the family and felt, look, that's maybe not a bad thing to look at. I'd always had a dream to go and work in Paris. So I started in 2003 on Faubourg Saint-Honoré in Paris, working with Spengler Fox. And that was probably the single largest, I mean, the brand I would have been most associated with at that time. So 2003 to 2017, I was CEO of that business in 2009. I sat down with a guy called Richard Polson, who was running Amgen at the time in Prague. I said, Richard, I'm no smarter today than I was yesterday. And he said, hey, Mark, you should check out this thing called YPO. So I joined in 2009, went out to Denver GLC in 2009, 2010. I can't remember what it was. And YPO kind of changed my life. I mean, it was just unbelievable. That vulnerability, those learnings. I was traveling a lot. We had a huge office in Moscow, very big office in Turkey, very big presence in the Middle East. And, so we were about 20 offices across the world, about 200 kind of consultants and researchers. So it was just a fantastic period. A very young team, a challenger brand. We would have been focused more on helping the Red Bulls with their top talent rather than the Coca-Cola. So we were kind of pitching as kind of a challenger brand. Executive search is a very old boys like world. And we were the challenger brand, that Street Fighter like brand in that space. And we just had a lot of fun, winning clients, going on pitches, constant learning, Gary. Yeah. So just a phenomenal time.
Oh, and it's a great journey, Mark. And to your point, executive search was always that, but then the brand of executives also evolved a little bit. They weren't always seen as sort of that old boys club as well. Our executives look different, so the search firms had to be different. And I think you were part of that evolution, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Mark, since then, you've done a lot more work on your own, and it's really established a brand as the connector. If you need to get somebody in Europe or frankly anywhere in the world, Mark will know the right guy. And I know we're part of an executive group together that you help put together on WhatsApp, where people can connect throughout the world in a variety of different capacities. But what motivated some of that as the next part of your career?
Look, I suppose I was, and again through YPO, I was lucky that YPO helped me do a management buyout on that search firm and be part of an exit to private equity as well in 2019, um, which was an incredibly emotional journey for me. But from somebody who'd always been kind of very focused on, you know, the next role, all those roles up to CEO of that business. Um, I always thought that's what I really, was made for. I mean, that was kind of those next steps. When I had the exit, Gary, I suddenly discovered kind of the currency of time. Um, my kids were kind of 6 or 7 at the time, and we were living in London. I didn't need to be on that conference call at like 9 in the morning. I wasn't needed on, so I felt there was that kind of transition to kind of go through from being the most important person to suddenly being not important at all. So there was a bit of an adjustment there, but I found I absolutely loved it, Gary. I mean, I was, my creativity, I created then the Naked Headhunter in 2019 to focus on owner founder searches, helping family businesses with kind of CEO succession and transition. So kind of moving even further away from kind of corporate search to challenger brand search to really owner founder and family business search, because I felt in corporates, in challenger brands, no matter how senior you place somebody in that organization, they don't really move the needle that much. But whereas if you're putting somebody in to succeed, an owner founder who's for 15 years grown from zero to 45 million pounds, dollars, euros, that person who's going to come in next can make or break that next phase of that business. Same in a family business. If it's $1 billion family business, putting somebody onto their board or replacing, a family member, becoming the CEO for the first time. I mean, there's just so much risk involved. But I found I loved that kind of the blood, sweat, and tears of, wow, I mean, we really have to find top talent because that will massively impact, that organization. So that was the principle of Naked Headhunter. And then I got really involved kind of through COVID, Gary, in communities. I mean, YPO was my original community. I'd been a member of Vistage before in London, so another peer-to-peer organization. I found my passion really was kind of coffees and conversations and ultimately connecting people. So I looked at different models. I created the virtual advisory board, which is now 1,400 kind of board members across the world. They sit on kind of 4,000 board seats. So it's an incredibly like active community in the board, in the advisory board space. Leadership transition to help executives kind of figure out if you've had a 30-year career, and you've gone a little bit like my story, but you've gone kind of promotion, and then suddenly you're out. It's like, well, I haven't looked for a job in 30 years. I don't even know where to start, So how to help somebody kind of figure out that next phase of their life. And when we look now at longevity, wellness, somebody's second career can actually end up being as long, if not longer, than their first career, So this whole executive in transition space, I was very passionate about. And I could just see there wasn't a lot of know-how. There wasn't a lot of shared experience. It was almost a sense of shame, like, shit, like I've lost my job. Like I was kind of constantly like told I was a performer, constantly being promoted, and then suddenly it's gone. And now I feel lost. I feel confused. I feel lonely. I don't know how to kind of overcome it. So we put a lot of kind of forum type experiences together, a lot of shared experience, a lot of like learning, some toolkits, some know-how, how somebody could kind of um, figure out what a good process looks like in a transition. That look, don't rely on headhunters completely. The line between, should you, when am I stalking somebody, or not? Like, what should I expect in terms of response, or how to use LinkedIn more efficiently, and how to tap into the hidden job market. So all those areas I just became super passionate about, Gary. And then that ultimately led then to this kind of CEO coffee group that I put together just 14, 15 months ago. I felt it was like, what is the most kind of typical headhunter thing I could do? And headhunters typically keep their cards close to their chest, which is their network. And I said, like, I'm just going to like invert it and allow people in my network to kind of find each other. And because I lived in fear, Gary, of saying, oh my God, I forgot to connect Gary with like John, or Gary, with Jane. And that would annoy me. It's like, oh, why didn't I think of like putting them together? But in this platform now, people can kind of find each other, like warm introductions. We're now doing kind of like individual connections, and that was the purpose of it. If somebody's traveling, that they can tap in and meet somebody else simply for a coffee, and it's that trusted network. It's now, like you said, yeah, it's over 800 CEOs like on it. And it's fun, and like those connections, Gary. Like when you sent the photo of meeting with the guys in Dubai, there was one yesterday in Paris. We've got the Miami one coming up.
That's
That that just makes me like so happy that
for sure.
oh, I'm so delighted. I knew you'd have a great conversation, So that's what excites me.
Well, and I think, Mark, everyone respects that you were the mastermind behind it. And if anything, when people think of executive roles and sort of building boards, et cetera, they're going to say, I've seen the quality of people Mark knows. I should talk to Mark about it. So while headhunters may have kept the cards to the chest historically, I don't think this was the best way to do it, because the proof is in the pudding. And
Totally.
I always talk about a book that Adam Grant wrote. It's called Give and Take, and sort
Yeah.
of describes people as givers, takers, or reciprocators. And
Yeah.
the strategic givers are the most successful people in
Yeah.
the world because
Yeah.
you paid forward.
Yeah. Look, I think it's super important, and look, it's probably like upbringing, and that's again like thanks to my mum and dad. But I think that um, just and probably kind of learnings through YPO as well, Gary, like the limits of what you can and can't do, and just knowing that, yeah, look, I I don't need to win a deal like every time. Um, but I'm happy if like Gary enjoyed that conversation. That would actually make me feel like quite fulfilled and happy. And I know at some stage, look, if Gary has a need, look, there's credibility there. And look, ultimately, I found people love recommending kind of bars, restaurants, cafes. But what really makes people happy is when they can recommend another person. So that's kind of a little bit the founding principle of it. And what I also discovered kind of through my voyage, Gary, was like I was probably a terrible CEO. Like I actually don't enjoy that. I love kind of the creativity, the spontaneity. I'm somebody who needs to be very organized. And I could never go back and be like a CEO of a business like again.
That's true.
I like working with CEOs. I like
Yeah.
employing CEOs, but I don't think I could ever do it again. I like having that that freedom and that space to kind of think about who Gary's going to have a coffee with next week.
Well, and I think it's a nice luxury to have, Mark, and you had to work hard to earn it. But I think it also provides good perspective to anyone in the network that is looking at that exit, et cetera, to be like, hey, don't think of that as the end. Like, what am I going to do next? And
Yeah,
in fact, think creatively. There's so much you can do in a way that is. Don't let that be a
a
prohibition.
blocker. Look, I think you're right. Like it is so. Um, I mean, we have guys in the CEO coffee group. I think the record is there's two guys. Oh, Michelle had like 38 years in one organization. Sammy had 37 years in one organization. And these are like amazing CEOs. But worked their way up, from kind of the mailroom almost, to the CEO spot. And I just think it's very challenging when you come out of an organization, if that's all you've known for your career, even if it's like 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, you know, we're all very blinkered when we're in organizations. Um, and that's why I love that ability to connect and connect people with other people, because just that eye-opening conversation can make a big change in what somebody's going through.
And Mark, I'm pivoting a little bit just because the you've placed so many people and understood the dynamics. Think of an organization that grew from scratch, and you had
Yeah.
founders and sort of family that grew a business, like you said, from 0 to 50 million euros. Great success story, and now they think, what type of board should I bring together? I need to think of succession plan. I need to
Yeah.
bring a CEO. How do you guide them through that journey? Like, because there's so much passion and so much,
Yeah.
I've always done it this way, and
Yeah.
now they have to let go of some
Oh,
of
I
that.
think look, I think the board build is probably the easier one, Gary, because that can literally be when you sit down and you're like, look, we've done the 0 to 50 million over the last like 10 years. We see an opportunity to take it from 50 to 250 and then maybe sell to strategic or sell to private equity or have an IPO, whatever the exit strategy is. But very often, like that CEO might feel, look, I'm absolutely cooked here. Like I'm exhausted. I've done the 0 to 50. I'm not the right person to kind of take it from 50 onwards. So then there's
Yeah,
the two pieces. Like, will I look, and it can be complementary, putting a board together to help me, because that growth will come from M&A, international growth. I've never done international growth. I've never done M&A. Hiring somebody or building a board, engaging somebody as a board member who has a lot of experience in my vertical or in my geography in international growth, in M&A, can save me a lot of pain and a lot of heartache. And when you look at kind of cost of like board compensation, if it's between 50 and $100,000 a year, cash comp, the return on investment on engaging that advisor is just anywhere between 1,000 and 1,000,000x. I mean, they will help make you millions, save you millions. They will always go, the extra yard. They have the battle scars. They've been through it. If the chemistry's there, I mean, that can be an unstoppable combination. So it is just an advising. Look, what are your main pain points? What kind of experiences would be useful for you? If it's a family business, typically they like to have somebody who's got a family business experience, because there's kind of some nuance there, legacy and succession, generational transfer. Owner founder business tend to want to have an exited entrepreneur, because that can
for
be
sure.
one of the clear goals of that current CEO. Um, and many case studies on the impact of, okay, if I'm going to put my board together, if it's four guys and I'm going to pay 50K, that's 200 grand plus some travel expense, blah, blah, blah. And like, we're going to meet up 4 times a year. So let's put another 50K. So it's going to cost me 250K a year to run my like board. But the expectation would be, that'll be the best 250K you'll ever spend, because that will turn into, and when companies are looking at, um, hiring a board member with a lot of credibility, the network, the ability to open doors, to move the needle on conversations that you just weren't advancing in with your team. So they can unlock significant revenue and significant savings and opportunities. So that 250 can be, like I said, 1,000 to 1,000,000x in terms of return on that. And so you can kind of look at, how do I actually kind of measure the success of that investment in my board? When it comes to hiring a CEO, successor, I mean, that is just such a ball ache, Gary. That is like really hard.
Yeah,
Um, it's, you're changing you're changing your life, because are you ready to do it? Are you ready to step out of, what you built your baby, for the last 15 years? Are you really ready to do it? Are you going to interfere? Are you ready for that?
yeah,
You'll probably become the chairman or whatever, but are you ready for that transition yourself? So almost that's the starting point. Like, are you ready? And then it's like, is your team ready? Is there any kind of employee who felt him or her might, be the right person to step in? Is there any delicacy there to be addressed? And then the person who's going to be stepping in. So you've got three kind of elements which will be, emotionally, and their day to day will change significantly. So trying to find alignment on that and find somebody who has that right kind of EQ, cultural match, kind of chemistry match, um, and who has that core experience on growth, on scaling, and can help you get there. It's so delicate. I mean, executive search by its nature, Gary, is fraught with failure. I mean,
Sure.
the successes of bringing somebody from external are, I think, in those stats that Corn Ferry had a few years ago, I think it was 47% of all external recruits, external hires at an executive level were considered kind of failed hires within 3 years. So it's ridiculous. And that's not always that the person was bad, but things change on the company side as well. They might go through M&A or a divestment or a change in ownership. So it's not always the fault of the person. But when you look at those statistics, it's hugely risky. So trying to my I've always felt my role or my team's role is to de-risk as much as possible. No surprises, try to de-risk, knowing that, that final shortlist, that preferred candidate, I think in even those statistics were like, is it 62% of in 62% of the cases, that first choice candidate does not end up taking the role. So having a robust shortlist in your number two candidate, number three candidate, um, so de-risking really becomes such a key. Finding the core experience, the technical tactical experience is probably the easier part, Gary. The emotional kind of fit and chemistry is very hard, and then that the motivation is kind of correct and appropriate as well. Because look, I've always felt, not in an overly dramatic way, that I love what I do because I get to kind of change people's lives by giving them, either a new opportunity or a career change, if it's executive or board. And I don't mean that in a grandiose way. I'm not a doctor or anything like that. I don't no kind of I don't live under any falsehoods there. But genuinely, we get so much energy from what we do, and we live it. And when people go through that transition, when that transition gets extended, people can lose a sense of purpose, lose a sense of direction. So we see how kind of integral it is to happiness. And if that's not for profit work or for profit work, I mean, it's the same. I mean, it does help kind of give a sense of purpose. So I'm very aware that I get to kind of change people's lives from a work point of view and how that impacts their overall happiness. Yeah. So something we take very great care in, and even kind of on like learning through feedback processes. Like, look, I remember my former board member told me that, like, Mark, we're actually in the business of delivering more bad news than good news. I thought, what do you mean? Well, there's only one candidate who gets the job.
Okay.
That phone call is the easiest phone call you're going to make. It's to the other three who were not selected. Like, there, it's when you have to be like delicate and duty of care and just be honest with them. But how you manage that, how you deliver that bad news, is actually more reputation enhancing than, going out for celebratory drinks with the one who got the job.
And Mark, I want to actually ask you a little bit more on that vein in terms of those candidates, but just as to wrap up the piece around, because if you're thinking about, the business owners, whether it's a family business that grew
Yep.
or whatever avenue was a series of acquisitions, etc. Building that board can be important. It can really help, despite the cost that it has initially. It can really help open certain doors and elevate the organization. I certainly went through that myself, and then experienced it 6 years ago, putting a board together, the value it can bring. I think similarly, from your perspective, Mark, you've seen this play out in sort of different organizations, and the reality is that there is it's at minimum worth considering it. And I think that's where somebody like you can be a really good guide, because you've seen it in so many situations, and then say, hey, let me introduce you to a few key people that can be part of that
Oh
process.
yeah. Look, I think it really is such a no-brainer that look, I've always felt, like, worst case, it's an interesting conversation. That's your
Yeah.
downside. Like, you spent an hour, 45 minutes, and you've had an interesting conversation. It mightn't go further, but just knowing that, you know, um, you can also go and engage McKinsey and spend millions on like a strat deck that nobody's going to implement or own. And like, if you want to, you can throw money away that way as well. I just think the most effective way to invest it is in putting a board together, because these are people who've, like, the right selection, the right ones can just help you move the needle significantly on what your main challenges are. And that typically is linked to kind of growth, new opportunities, new markets, international expansion, um, new verticals, could be fundraising as well. I mean, there's so many people who've actually done what you are struggling with. So why not ask for help? And, I would
That's
always be respectful. It is always people's time. I would never ask people to do it for free. I think, agreeing, like, like we said, if it's 50K or whatever that
yeah,
number is, those board fees are never particularly high. People are not really doing it for the money, but their time should always be respected. And like I said, I've rarely seen a case where that board appointment is not able to significantly help significantly help that CEO move considerably forward on their pain points. So,
that's right. That's right. Mark, now I'm pivoting a little bit on the other side. So the executives, somebody that worked somewhere for a long time now is thinking about career change and
yep,
what that could look like, or the guy that got the bad news that didn't get the job, and to a large extent, it's not a reflection of them. Like it's just as you do that discovery with the client on the other end, you actually have to think like who's the best fit, and it's
yep,
not super easy that I must get this job. It's is this the right fit? Because that failure rate is so high
yep,
that that initial process and that investment is important for both sides.
yep, yep.
Well, in having seen that over time, what advice would you have for executives that are thinking of the next career change and then the next step in their career?
I think about it as early as possible. There is still that old adage that it's easier to find a job while you have a job. I think it's, somewhat true, because, you've got salary, you've got income. Um, but I would definitely recommend for somebody to lean into it, even if it's that executive phase, or you're looking at second career, portfolio career, lean into it early. I mean, I've never had a job description request for somebody of a certain age, to step into a board role. Now you're seeing kind of significant kind of decrease in the average age of board members globally. It's more like specific skill related. When you look at new technologies, I mean, even AI, I mean, those, it's not going to be a 70-year-old board member like leading your AI kind of growth. So I think the lean into it early, Gary. I would say to anybody, start stepping into your network more. It's ultimately your network's network, which will 80% likelihood be the source of that next opportunity for you.
That's right.
Um, so, I would just encourage people to, think about, look, what is the next 12, 24, 36 months looking like for you? If there is a potential change like in the pipeline, and try not to be surprised. Like, I think, like, so many large corporates are significantly changing. I mean, that's only gonna those kind of VP, president type roles, exco roles will only be, there'll be less of. So I think looking at your network, getting into conversations, talking to um good proactive headhunters, keeping your LinkedIn profile kind of fresh. When you look at kind of that transition, I would always say, look, it's 80% likely your next role will come from your network or network's network, 10% maybe through a headhunter search firm, and 10% through LinkedIn. If you look at kind of LinkedIn, um, you look at kind of Forbes 30 under 30 CEOs, Forbes 40 under 40 CEOs. These guys have built their whole exco leadership team through they're very savvy on tools like LinkedIn. So they will be hiring board members through LinkedIn and reaching out to kind of experts in their field. So if that's of interest to you, then that would be the purpose of kind of making sure your LinkedIn profile is fresh. I'm not saying you have to have a podcast every week on it, but definitely keep it fresh and reflective of your story and where you can impact. And the rest, I think, look, one of my favorite things to do, Gary, is this kind of Rolodex exercise that I think people, if you've had a 30-year career in Morgan Stanley or in Coca-Cola or across 2 or 3 organizations, you've seen some unbelievable talent, go ahead of you. And I think reaching out to your former bosses, your former bosses' bosses, former CFOs of organizations, these are people who now populate large They're permanently in portfolio stage of their career. If they're alive, if they're alive, they're still going to be very active and still very sought after. Reconnecting with those people, because they'll be a tremendous source of referral. There will be certain, even you mightn't have directly reported to them, they will still know, oh, well, you did survive kind of 10 years in Coke or 15 years in P&G, so you have to be like decent, yeah. There will be some kind of warmth there, and a willingness to help in most cases. So I think putting that list together, and reaching out to those people saying, look, I'm leaning into the next phase. I'm thinking about a career change. I'm thinking about a pivot. I'm thinking about board roles. I saw you've done it successfully. Look, is there any kind of shared experience or guidance you could give me? You'll have probably like a 7 out of 10 positive response rate to those reach outs versus, if you're lucky, 1 out of 10 from a cold outreach. So I think like keep always trying to keep things as warm as possible. Your network is much, much richer than you think. People just don't normally tap into it or try to expand it. And then, leaving every conversation with like, look, thanks so much for your time. And is there one other person that you could recommend I talk to? And then you'll double the size of your network over a period of time. So.
Oh, that's great advice, Mark. I think that will really resonate with a lot of executives in the network. I'm pivoting to a piece of the podcast that we call the rapid fire question.
Yep.
So for this one, we're going to sort of one word answer first thing that comes top of mind. But before I go there, I'm going to ask one last question when we wrap up that piece of it. And it'll be around, you have a vast network they've maintained, much like the answer that you just gave. But it's what are some of the strategies you've used to stay on top of and stay in touch with all these people, remember as much as you do about all the people, because you have a fantastic.
I thought you were going to ask me who's my favorite person, Gary. I'd have to say you at that stage. So that's, who's your favorite of everybody?
I would never put you in that position. I know that'll be a challenging answer considering how many people you know. So, but so I want you to think about that. We'll do the rapid fire questions and we'll come back to that.
Perfect.
To that question. Okay. So first rapid fire question. How many languages do you speak?
4.
And if I recall correctly, it was English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese.
And Czech a little bit.
And Czech. Okay.
A little bit.
It's gotten better.
5 then.
What word do you hate, if any?
Never.
I love that. What words do you have a hard time pronouncing, if any?
Ask sometimes.
What is your favorite word in any language?
Ornitorrinco.
And for the audience, what does that mean, Mark?
It means duck-billed platypus in Spanish. Very rarely used, Gary, apart from these contexts. So, ornitorrinco.
I love that. What's one word to describe yourself by?
Warm.
I think that resonates. I think it's true. So, Mark, back to the question that I asked before we got to the rapid fire questions. How do you manage to stay in touch with all these people and always be proactive and have such
I've got a fabulous team of people. Like, Gary, I mean, I'm blessed. Like between the different communities and the search team, there's probably about 30 people like working with me. I think, look, we're trying to use technology more to help ensure that nobody falls through the cracks. I live in fear, Gary, of not getting back to people. And I know it happens, but it absolutely like stresses the hell out of me that, oh my God, I forgot to get back. Try to have an exercise of trying to make sure, I mean, WhatsApp, I mean, even though we grew CEO Coffee through it, it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, unread messages, finding that tab that says unread so I can at least go through the unread ones. There's a cool labeling technique there as well. Label, like swipe, follow up. I find that useful as well. I try to keep my email down to like inbox 0. Like I probably get it down to about, depending on how long the day's been. Things always start great on a Monday, Tuesday. By Wednesday, you've hit like, oh crap, like I'm really struggling now. Thursday, Friday, or like I just need to get through to the end of the weekend so I can kind of like focus on it again. So yeah, I no magic formula, Gary, but that internal motivation of like, I just don't want to let anybody down. Like I definitely want to get back. And even like I said, it goes back to that adage of, look, it's not always good news. Sometimes it's just an update, and just look, I'm still here. Like I haven't forgotten. Yeah. So that's probably the burning. But and then I suppose that ultimate feeling of, you know, um, I probably know enough people that if I just look after those people, and I'm honest and respectful to those people and kind to those people, that I'll be okay. It's kind of like, well, don't always think about, next. Like, stay close to who you've got already.
And Mark, I think you do a fantastic job at it. And those great pieces of advice. Ultimately, you keep investing in it, whether staying on WhatsApp. And I appreciate those pieces of advice around how to keep WhatsApp organized. I struggle with that as well. And, you know, clearing email inbox, etc. It takes a certain level of persistence, but it's also your investment in social capital. And I think no one can argue that social capital is just as important, if not more important, than actual
Yeah.
capital, quite
Yeah.
in many instances.
Totally.
Mark, really appreciate you joining me on the podcast. It's I knew the time would fly by, and I would have many, many more things I would want to ask you. But alas, the recommendation is to keep it at a certain length so people can consume it during a commute. And we'll just have to do a second round of this.
Gary, that's like so kind. And look, thanks for asking. And look, it was great to share a little bit more with you as well. And look, thanks for being part of it. Like I said, though, I think all these kind of communities get built by like engaged people, and that's what makes a huge difference. So thank you for kind of putting your hand up and getting involved as well.
Appreciate it, and I'll hopefully see you in Miami in about a month's time.
Looking forward to it, Gary.
Same here,
Take
and
care,
enjoy
Gary.
Switzerland.
All the
Thank
best.
you.
Thanks a lot.